All right, welcome to the third day of our curriculum sessions where we're focusing on grade 4 to 6 ELAL. I'm Tricia Satropa and I'll be leading today, but I have Irene Heppel and Kim Tackerberry, who are my colleagues and might just jump in. So I'm going to take off my sticky note that says to record, because I did that. And I will carry on. I want to start with a land acknowledgement. I am particularly lucky. I feel this is the scene behind my house. So I enjoy living on this beautiful land, which is part of Treaty 7 and part of Treaty 4. I kind of live on the border of that. And I want to make sure that I'm always honoring the land and acknowledging the story of the land that I live on and being appreciative and being a steward of that land. So I remember the people of the Blackfoot who lived here before me and the people of the Métis people of Region 3. And I hope that everyone has a little time to get outside today too. So we'll begin. I used a literacy block structure to organize this session. So I'm going to go through this session as I would a sample literacy block, and I will share that sample literacy block with you. It'll be in your notes that you get at the end of the session along with this recording. So I just wanted to make sure that you knew that this is available. It's not the only way to do it. And as you'll see in the plans that I share, I have a sample for grade 4, a sample for grade 5, and a sample for grade 6. And this is one way that a teacher and I worked on that you could start doing a plan for your days. So beginning with a journal or a morning message, then doing some vocabulary or word work, and someone specifically asked about morphology on Monday. So I'm going to add a little bit of morphology in. A read aloud is always nice. It gives your students a chance to hear fluency. And when they hear fluency being modeled, they're more able to do that back for you. So I'll explain how I do a read aloud and then give them a chance to practice to become more fluent. Then some time for independent reading, then a quick mini lesson that gets them into their small group work where they can practice what you've explained in the mini lesson. And in this plan, we also included some of the things that we would do cross-curricularly. And so when I plan an ELAL unit or a year plan with teachers, I often encourage them to think about what they would do in other classes that support their English language arts and literature. And so that might be oral language or that might be writing, and often that fits in with doing presentations and reporting, that kind of work. All right, I'm going to go ahead and model it for you. So I like to start with a little piece of literature to let the kids know that I think literature is important and fun. And so here's a sample that I want to share with you from Judith Worst. I'm learning to say thank you, and I'm learning to say please, and I'm learning to use Kleenex, not my sweater, when I sneeze. And I'm learning not to dribble, and I'm learning not to slurp, and I'm learning, though it sometimes really hurts me, not to burp. And I'm learning to chew softer when I eat corn on the cob, and I'm learning that it's much, much easier to be a slob. So I would have a little conversation with my students about some of the things that the person in this poem learned, and maybe some of the things that they're currently learning, and just discuss some fun parts of learning and enjoy the playfulness of that poem. And I'm thinking about Kim and Irene too, because we're all boy moms and I'm sure that we can all relate to this poem, and probably lots of you can too. And hopefully students would get a little giggle out of it. So that brings in there, I wanted to move my slide a little bit so you can see it brings in text forms and structures. So one of the skills and procedures is that poetry engages the imagination and can encourage individuals to connect with other people, places, ideas, or emotions. So our conversation would bring together that poem and the students' ideas and emotions. All right, so it could connect also to a morning message, and that's where we would talk about the learning. I have included an article that will come with you as well about morning messages starting the day. This article came out in the COVID times, so it's more about how to engage students online. And I think it's just as applicable to students who are in your classroom, that if you have a morning message up on the board and the students can come in and either respond to your morning message. As you know, you've probably heard me say in the past few days, I'm getting ready to go back to teaching, and my students will all have a Chromebook. So I'm looking forward to having messages that they reply to. So we have a bit of a relationship building in that way, using the technology, but also writing and reading for a meaningful purpose, that we're connecting using a morning message. And so that connects to the curriculum with the learning outcome of writing. And one of the cusps there is that students create texts that reflect personal voice and style through creative and critical thinking processes. So they're writing about themselves, they're talking about a time when they learned something, and they're connecting their experience to some kind of emotional happening and event. And as you're going to see later, I'll bring that opener back as a piece of their writing time in small group. I'm not checking the chat, so maybe if, oh, people are finding it. I love it. The Edutopia article. Thank you. All right. Maybe I'll just move that to the side. Kim or Irene, if you find something that I need to stop and address, feel free to let me know. All right. So that's our little opener, writing a morning. I would have a morning message and the students would write back to me. Okay, so yesterday, no, not yesterday, on Monday, someone asked a little bit about, so I'm going to exit the slideshow here, asked a little bit about word work and word matrices. And I just mentioned that I like to use a word matrix. Actually, it was about morphology. Someone asked if they were doing morphology, what kind of work would we use and what do we recommend? And I've done a few sessions with Peter Bowers. All of his information is quite easy to find in a quick Google search, but he does structured word inquiry. And if you get a chance to do a session with him, it's very enjoyable. Actually, he's quite interesting to listen to as well. But his idea is this word matrix, and that we discuss the meaning of the pieces of the words. So the name is on the slide. It's Peter Bowers, and his work is called Structured Word Inquiry. You're welcome. So here's what I would do with my students. I'm going to kind of demonstrate how I would work through this. So I would say to them, the two pieces that we've talked about today, the poem we looked at and our morning message, both were connected to learning. They both had something to do with learning. So let's take a minute or a few minutes and really look at the word learning. Sorry, excuse me. There's a base word or a root word, the word learn, and then we could talk about what it means to learn, and we might come up with a class definition of the word learn. And then we would talk about the suffix that's added to it. So in this case, the suffix ing is telling us that it's happening right now. So it's not in the past and it's not in the future. It's a right now kind of word. And so the person is in the process of learning. And then I would talk to them about, can you think of any other suffixes that might possibly be used with the word learn? And hopefully they would think about learned. So that would be in the past. So they learned something before this grade. They learned something at home. Maybe we would get to the fact that because they are learning things, that makes them a learner. So they're currently learning. You're a learner. And if we look at in the vocabulary section of the grade 4 curriculum, it tells us that they should learn the suffix able, A-B-L-E. So if something is learnable, then we would have a discussion about what kinds of things are learnable and not learnable. And when something is not learnable, what would we put as a prefix? If there weren't so many of you, I would make you do this, but lucky for you, I'm going to give you the answers. So if it's not learnable, then we put the prefix un and it becomes unlearn. Now let's see if would that make a new word with ed, unlearned? Yeah, I think that is a word. And we might check it. And all the while, I didn't say this, we should be writing down the new words that we're creating. So somewhere have a list that of all the words we're developing. So we would have learned, learning, learner, learnable, and then we would come to unlearnable. And are there any other prefixes that we might use? What if you learned something and then forgot it, then had to be taught it again? Well, we might come up with relearn. So then underneath we would put that new word as well. I'm just going to look at what Kim's saying in the chat. He regrets not calling this approach scientific word inquiry. Yes, right. I remember that. Because to encourage all students to be scientists when it comes to understanding the meaning of words. Yeah, that resonates with me too. That is a good way to think of it. And if you want to call it that with your students, I think you should go ahead and do it. So a few pieces about this. This would be a discussion with students. Like I wouldn't do it as quickly as I did it with you. I wouldn't give them all the answers. Obviously, I'd hope that as much of the answers would come from them. We would talk about the meaning of each piece and then the new meaning once it's put together. And I like to make it connected to the work that we're doing in the class. So I would go through which prefixes and suffixes they're expected to know at each grade level and which ones they're expected to know in the previous grade levels, and make sure that we cover all of those throughout the year. But it never hurts if you see it in your piece of writing or whatever you're reading at that time to pull apart a word in this way and make sure that students are fully understanding the importance of the pieces of the words. Okay, Good point. You don't have to always lead the learning as a teacher, right? Once they, as Kim's saying, once they know how to do this or see you model it a few times, then they'll be able to do it themselves in a small group. All right. Okay, I will show you in the curriculum. I'll just, because people are asking, the prefixes and suffixes are under the organizing idea of vocabulary. So right now I have grade 4 and grade 5 open. So you just scroll down under vocabulary. This is one that isn't in a perfect row across, but the suffixes that are mentioned in grade 4 are Y, ISH, ABLE, IBLE, FUL, ANT, ENT. And then in grade 5, all of these are mentioned. So look under vocabulary, and the grade 6 ones, let's see which row. Okay, so EN, IZE, pro, com, con, and OC. And actually, I'm going to share with you a plan that Charlie Craig and I made with the Barren Grounds for grade 6. And they talk about encircling a few times. It comes up, they encircled the camp. And that would be a great time to introduce the prefix EN. Kim also mentioned earlier that on our ARPDC,
do you want me to find it?
That might help.
Okay, I'll find it and then I can post it.
That one of our colleagues created a document that has the prefixes and suffixes and which ones she would do in the first half of the year and which ones she would do in the second half of the year as a progression. All right, are there any other questions about the morphology at this moment? You might, I don't want to have a capital there. You might want to take a little bit of time on your own time this afternoon or whenever to look into that structured word inquiry, because that was a pretty brief and specific example. But I think we'll move on. We're getting, Kim's gonna find you an example of planning. And do you want to put it into the chat or do you want to show it? I'll give you time. I'm gonna go.
Sorry, I'm madly pulling them, but I'll put them in the chat because there's a grade 4, grade 5, grade 6 version. Awesome. So perhaps I'll put it in the chat and I'll also send it to Heather and she could send it in the email that goes out. Would that work?
That would be perfect.
Okay, awesome.
Thank you, Kim.
No problem.
All right. I'm going to move on then to the next part. So that was just the word work part of our lesson. We're going to go back to the slideshow. All right. In other sessions, I've had people ask about English language learners, and whether you have English language learners or not, the vocabulary strategies that Katie Arnett suggests are valuable for all learners. So she does work specifically on English language learners, but these are ways of learning that would benefit all your students. So she has found in her research that vocabulary learning is probably some of the most valuable learning that you can help your English language learners with. So I went through some of her key points of what she says to do with the vocabulary. So first of all, you identify and present the required language at the beginning of a lesson or the activity. And I think we do this, right? We naturally, if you know that there's going to be a word or words that might be a stumbling block for your learners, you introduce it beforehand and you make sure that they have a good understanding. You might even do a word matrix or pull it apart so that students can see the purpose of each part of that word and then the meaning as a whole. She suggests using word walls and word maps and having them up on the wall. And I'm going to talk a little bit about word walls right away. But word walls need to be interactive and they need to change a little bit throughout the year. Otherwise, they are wallpaper and no one will pay attention to them. So make sure that if you have a word wall, you're doing something with it. And if you have word maps, which are word sort of clusters or groupings that have lines between them that show the connections between words, if you have those, you might want to change them out like with each unit that you do or each term that you have. And then access the senses to facilitate vocabulary acquisition. So all of the senses, you want to hear it. If there's something that students can taste that's related to what you're talking about, or smell, but get up and move and use your whole body. That's coming into the next part, number 4. Use role play and games to represent and reinforce new vocabulary. I had the privilege of teaching in a fine arts school for 5 years, and those kids loved acting out vocabulary. They would do a tableau, sort of a still life, or sometimes they would do an action. We played lots of games, which I'm going to show you to reinforce new vocabulary. And the last one, explain vocabulary using examples and synonyms and antonyms and cognates and teacher-learner definitions. So most of this you would see in your classic Freyer model, which I'm sure all of you have used. That's an oldie but a goodie. Examples, synonyms, and antonyms usually come into a Freyer model. Cognates is, as I showed in the word matrix, just changing prefixes and suffixes to play with the meaning of a word. And teacher-learner definitions. So the definition that you might come up with in class, you might create a class definition of a word rather than always looking it up in a dictionary or a dictionary site. Okay. So I will go a little bit more into word walls. I always have had word walls and used them thoroughly. I know lots of people tell me that they don't have room, and I would say make your words smaller then and continue to use them. In my new classroom, I am putting my word wall words on hexagons so that we can also do hexagonal thinking with the word wall words. But here are some of the games. I didn't put in hexagonal thinking, but anyway. So concept attainment is just give me an example or a non-example of this word on your word wall. Pictionary, so you have, obviously you know how to play that, but you have one student choose a word on the word wall and not say what it is, and then they draw until the other students guess the word. Charades is very much like Pictionary, except they're acting out the meaning of the word. And the laser show, it's funny, but it works. This is a game I would play with my grade 6s often. We would turn out the lights and it wouldn't be completely dark because we had windows, but we would turn off the lights and I would use like a laser pointer and point at a word, and then the students would have to give me the definition, which it doesn't sound like much, but they found it really fun, maybe just because the lights were out. The I am. So I would have a student stand in front of the word wall and say, give the qualities of the word. So I'm thinking of democracy in grade 6, but they would give the qualities of democracy, for example, and then the other students would have to guess which word they're talking about. And oh, this is the memory game. So I'm sure you've all played the memory game with different words, but you can play the memory game with your definitions. So you have flashcards with the words on one and the definitions on a different card for matching in memory. You place all the cards face down on a table, and students take turns flipping over 2 cards per turn. And if they don't turn over the word and its definition, or if they do turn it over, the word and the definition, they get to keep it. But if the cards don't match, they turn them back over, and the student who collects the most card wins. So I am even going to do this with my grade 10s this year, using the words that I've put onto hexagons for them. And we can take them off the bulletin board and put them back onto the bulletin board. I currently am using a magnetic word wall, which is actually an old whiteboard. All right, that was quite a bit about word walls. Just wondering if anyone has questions. This all connects to the learning outcome of vocabulary, though. Okay, let's move on then, because I'm sticking with vocabulary. All right, so in my mini lesson, and this is a short part that comes before letting the students off into their small groups. In my mini lesson, and for the sake of this lesson, I pretended that we were reading the book Otter, which I'm going to stop sharing and let you have a look at the book that I'm talking about. So the book Otter is about an otter, and I would highly recommend it for grade 4, probably level, but it depends on your class. You might use it for others. It's written in verse, so it's a novel in verse, and it's a lovely story. So if we said today's lesson is about adding description to your writing. So if I look into my book, I found a place on page 104 where the author uses really great description in their writing. Oh, my page is stuck together. Too many sticky notes. So in this case, I'm using a single page of a novel as a mentor text. So if we talk about a mentor text being a sample of good writing that students would want to model in their own writing. So I look at the book and I show them. It says, "The wind was not itself today. She didn't like the way it kept bullying the water." And when I read that, I thought, what a fantastic example of personification. The author is Catherine Applegate, who you might have heard of before, and she's a fabulous writer. I would use just those few lines as a mentor text for their journal writing. So then I would send them back. I'll share screen again. Send them back to what they wrote as a response in their morning message, where they told me about a time when they learned something. So I'd say, look back at your journal entry for today. Is there an object in your journal entry that you could have described in a more interesting way? And then we'll try using personification to describe that object. So a little bit of practice using figurative language, and this is also connected to vocabulary. In grade 4 particularly, the figurative language includes personification, analogy, and idiom. So if you want to define what figurative language is expected in each grade, you would go to your curriculum and you could use that magnifying glass that I showed you on Monday, and you could type in figurative language. So that's one example of figurative language that I would give them from the book that we're doing a read aloud with. There's one more book that I want to recommend. And maybe I'll stop sharing again so you can see the book I'm sharing. This book is called Wet Cement, and it is a mix of concrete poems. And it just so happens that in grade 4, concrete poetry is one of the styles that is mentioned to do with grade 4 students. So Wet Cement by Bob Raska, it's a fabulous little book, and I'm going to give you a little example. Oops, that's an example of a metaphor. I went through the book and put sticky notes for every piece of figurative language that I could find. So in the poem called Eraser, which is spelled incorrectly, it's spelled Eracer. It uses another example of personification. So the poem is Eraser. Erasers will stick by you I'm going to start again, sorry. Erasers will stick by you, on that you can depend, for giving all your dumb mistakes a friend until the end. So again, it's an inanimate object, an eraser, and it's given characteristics that would only be taken on by a person. So they forgive, they stick by you, they're a friend. So it's an interesting and fun way to think about personification. And again, as all, I don't know if you can see it at all, but as all concrete poems are, it's written in a way that shows that it's about an eraser. So that's another fun little poem. I'm going to pause right there and have a look at what Kim has put in the chat, because that's a good piece of information. Let's just have a quick look at this year plan, a sample year plan. Okay, the year to glance planning documents. All right. So if we want to have a look at, do you suggest the grade 4, Kim?
That's the one I'm most familiar with, but you could really choose any. And I noticed that it shifted a little bit. The one that I was using was highlighted the information per term, but now I notice it's in columns, term 1, term 2. So it's, yeah, it's still the same idea. I know I had a little bit of, yeah, there we go. You have to be patient with the downloads, I find.
Okay, it's taking a bit. Oh, it's a 3-term one now.
Yeah, so instead of term 1 and term 2, it's been adapted to 3 terms, I noticed as
well. Okay. So some of the pieces you would do in all 3 terms, obviously.
Yes.
Okay. And yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, I was just going to add to what you said previously. Some of the morphology, you'll notice that certain, like you had done suffixes or prefixes, have been allocated to certain terms. So I thought that was interesting when you were talking, which sparked me to think about this document. So I'm sorry if I'm taking.
No, it's all right. It's important too that people know how to find these things. So this is the one that's not highlighted. I think there's one that is highlighted too on that same page, but that's on the ARPDC resources site. And if you go to the year at a glance document, I know that some people in their year planning have chosen to print these out and do the highlighting for themselves, right? So then they've highlighted which terms they want to do them in. And I would strongly recommend doing planning with another person, because definitely talking it out makes a huge difference. All right. Thanks, Kim. That was helpful. I'm going to go back to that website also in a few minutes too. I had not planned. I've seen that a couple people are asking about the slides, not the slides, but the recording is available. Thank you, Irene. All right. So that was our mini lesson on otter, on vocabulary and figurative language. So now I'm gonna skip to how I would do a routine. This is starting to look like my classroom. I'm full of books in front of me. Okay. Mm-hmm. So if we talk about using routines in the classroom, yeah, on Monday again, with the recording, Heather sent you the Project Zero website. So on that Project Zero website, there are many, like I would say over 100 routines. Do not try to do very many of them. Otherwise, you're constantly teaching a routine instead of teaching the content. So teach 2 or 3 routines and reuse those routines in different contexts. This routine that I'm going to show you is called Chalk Talk. And although it has the word talk in it, at first, the students do not talk. At first, they need to do some thinking and writing. So I would give them a large piece of paper, maybe ledger-sized paper, or even larger if you want. And I would put that quote from the book Otter. "The wind was not itself today. Otter didn't like the way it kept bullying the water." So again, we're reusing pieces so that they're not doing something new all the time. We keep coming back to the book Otter and making that connect. So in the strategy, Chalk Talk, we have them go in a group of 3 and write their response to the following questions. What ideas come to mind when you consider this quote? What connections can you make to other people's responses? And then what questions arise as you think about the ideas and consider the responses and comments of others? So first of all, they're just writing their ideas. And I might just put on the board ideas, connections, questions, just to simplify the language. So they're just putting their ideas on the paper and not discussing yet. And then they're reading each other's ideas and branching off and saying things like, this makes me think of, or this is related to, or this is like something else that they know about. And they're making connections on the paper. Then finally, when they get to the questions part, they can start talking to each other. Because sometimes if you have them talking too soon, students aren't giving their own ideas, they're giving the ideas of others in their group or others in a different group. So we have them put down their ideas first, make connections, and then they can start discussing when they have something to talk about. All right. And this is connected to oral language. It involves listening and speaking skills, and it supports respectful interactions, which was part of the old curriculum, and it's still part of the new curriculum. And so that you know, this Chalk Talk is on the Project Zero website, and they give you a nice one-pager on each of the routines so that you can make it happen again in your classroom. All right. So that is PZ, or PZ, I should say, pz.harvard.edu. And then within that, you'll be able to find all of those other routines. Okay, so that is a routine that I would lead into some small group work. And then teachers have a choice, of course, we always have a choice. But when you have student activities, you might have to make a decision. Is today a small group work kind of day? Is it a partner work kind of day? Or is it an independent work kind of day? So if you have them doing small group work, here's a possibility. You might have them work in their small groups to help each other find more interesting ways to describe simple objects. So after they go through that chalk talk example, you might have them share their responses to the morning message with the people in their group. And maybe someone will say something like, I talked about my bicycle and learning to ride a bike. And then the whole group sort of gives each other ideas and shares ways that you could describe that bicycle in a more interesting way. That's a possibility with small groups. And I don't know if I've said it before, but lots of research shows that groups of 3 is the optimal size. Peter Liljedahl, he does his research in math, but I think that it can translate into any subject. Groups of 3 have the best conversation coming up, and it's not so big that it allows someone to hide in the group. So that's optimal as groups of 3 if you can manage it. And then if you wanted to do a fluency lesson, this is a possibility. With a partner, practice reading the poem as you think the author intended it to be read. And I forget who that comes from, but the phrase "as the author intended it to be read," it's from another person whose sessions I've been in many times. It's not coming to me right now. I should have credited her on the slide. And this is a possibility. When you're ready, record yourself reading that poem on Flipgrid. So lots of students have Flipgrid on their Chromebooks. Some of them even have phones in grade 6. But this is a fluency activity. So they practice reading a poem or they practice reading a paragraph. You can do this with their library book if you want to, but read it until you can read it in the way that the author intended it to be heard, and record it on Flipgrid. So that's a fluency lesson, and it fulfills the outcome of demonstrating comprehension of text through appropriate stress on words, pausing, phrasing, intonation, and use of punctuation. And lastly, if the teacher chooses that this is an independent kind of day for student activities, rewrite the story of a time when you learned something. In your rewrite, use some personification. So we're going back to that morning message and the piece that they wrote for their morning message and turning it into a more polished piece of writing that they might share. Okay, read it as that comes in daily 5 too. That's not who I'm thinking of. Darn, sorry, but I'm glad that it says it there too. All right, so the curriculum connections for all of these student activities are below. So I said the fluency one. Also, it fulfills a vocabulary intention. Analyze the meaning of words and phrases expressed figuratively if you choose to do the personification piece. In writing, words are selected to enhance written text. Words selected to enhance written text include figurative language, so that's in the writing as well. And conventions, if you do the independent work, capitalization and punctuation can be used to support writing fluency. So all of these are connected to the curriculum. All right, so those are all possible student activities. Then I wanted to do a little bit on assessment. So if you choose to do the chalk talk, it can be something that you assess, and it can be something that you report on. So I wanted to show you how to do a guide to success. And this is from the work of Garfield Ginny Newman at the Thinking Consortium. And I know that lots of people use his work. It's at TC Squared. But one of the pieces that the consortium has worked on is creating guides to success. this helps your learner know if they've been successful. And if they haven't been successful, it helps the learner know what they need to do to be successful. So where they fell short and where they did well. So with the activity Chalk Talk in their small groups, I would give this to them before we practice the Chalk Talk. So here's what you need to do to just carry on this activity. You need to offer relevant information. You need to consider the perspectives of others, and you'll need to listen to the statements of others. So that is the basic elements of how to make this a successful activity. The criteria for excellent would be more like this. You offer not just relevant information, but thoughtful ideas. So you've really put some thinking into it before you give an answer. You contribute to the conversation by adding to the thoughts of others. And this is also from the curriculum in the oral language section. And it's an important part of Chalk Talk because this is how the students branch out from their original thought. They contribute to what other people are thinking, to the ideas that their partners or other people in their group have put onto the page. And then you expand on the contributions of others. So this is what needs to happen just for the task to be done properly. This is what needs to happen for the task to be done at a level of excellence. And then there's a place for them. You might not fill this out every time you do the Chalk Talk activity, but maybe once a term, you have them reflect. So if you have 3 reporting terms, have them reflect in each reporting term. What's going well when we do Chalk Talk? What needs more work when we do Chalk Talk? And where would I like to go next? So give them something to aspire to how can they be better? And so their own self-reflection and then the teacher reflection as well. And then this I would use as report card comments, or some of them anyway, take them as report card comments. Guide to success, I don't do for every activity, but for some of the key ones or ones that we repeat in different ways, I would make this for my students. Okay, so that is just one way of assessing. I will also show you a possible single point rubric. So this is if I had my students take that writing that they did at the beginning of the class, so their response to the morning message, and I had them polish it up and make it into a bigger piece of writing. So once they've had a chance to work with it and improve on it, then I would use a single point rubric to assess it. So this is a possibility of how I could set up a single point rubric using grade 4 criteria. And as you see, this is how I've created it. This is just copied and pasted. So I took the learning outcome for grade 4 vocabulary. It says students expand vocabulary and analyze morphemes to communicate in multiple contexts. So what I want to see in this piece of writing is that they communicated clearly and accurately using precise alternatives for commonly used words, including personification. I wouldn't mark them on this unless I had taught them personification and told them that these are the expectations, right? Nothing in an assessment should be a surprise. Then from the writing learning outcome, this is the only writing learning outcome in grade 4. It's that students construct and organize text to share perspectives and develop creative expression. So I've taken one of the cusps. Nope, in this case, I've taken 2. I want them to apply creative thinking processes to enhance the expression of ideas and emotions. That's right from the curriculum. And experiment with sensory detail or figurative language to add interest and keep audiences engaged. So those are 2 cusps from the writing section. And then lastly, conventions. And this is the learning outcome on conventions. And for the purpose of this piece of writing, I've chosen to focus on capitalization and a variety of punctuation. So you can't mark everything on every piece of writing. So 5 is definitely a maximum that I would use. I wouldn't want to mark too many things on each piece of writing. That's a lot of things to look for, but I'd be very specific. And then of course, this helps me with report card comments as well. All right, that was, there are samples of single point rubrics also on the ARPDC resources page, and a little bit of explanation about how we create them and what we use them for. Okay. I am going to go to the ARPDC website shortly and show you again where to find some of these things. And it's now. So the grade 4 day plan, the sample that I just modeled with you, it's all in this document. And so you don't need the slides because you'll have this and you'll be able to look at the curriculum connections and how it's planned out. I could put it into the chat for now, but I'll also make sure that you get it with your with the recording. Oh, sorry, that just only went to one person instead of to everyone. Do that again. Okay, so this is the piece that I've been demonstrating throughout this session. But I want to take you to maybe I'll just show you how I got to here first. All right, so if we go to it's just arpdc.ab.ca, and we want to look at new curriculum resources. And for today, we're going into the ELAL. So I believe that what Kim shared with us is that sample year at a glance planning. That's
yes.
Yes. Thank you. And so that's perfect. It has all the pieces of the curriculum there, and then you can go through and decide which term you want to highlight which outcomes. So that was the very first resource that comes up on the ELAL page. I believe that these are the blank ones, the year at a glance, and the sample ones are already highlighted with ideas of how you could sort those outcomes. All right. There are curriculum comparison documents, which might be very important. And I did get an email yesterday asking about K-3. There are several excellent K-3 resources that you might want to have a look through. Even if you're teaching 4 to 6, if your students are struggling with reading, there are lots of helpful pieces in the intervention support. All right, this is the toolkit that I did show on Monday, and it has many pieces in it. But what I want to show you today, I should have said single point rubric and a 1 point rubric are the same thing. So if you want to look at how we created some of those 1-point rubric or single point rubrics, they're also on here. But what I really want to show you is the long range planning. And every time we add something, it gets bumped a little further down, but here it is. Long range planning, ELAL, based on literacy routines. So these are the year plans that we've created with teachers to provide a sample of how you might do a long range plan. So I'm going to open, well, I might open all 4 of them, but I'll show you the beginning is those literacy structures. And then throughout the unit, we took apart each section of that literacy block. So in the first bit of time, we do journaling or morning message. Then we just copied and pasted which learning outcomes are we going to fulfill there, which understandings are we going to fulfill there. And then we went into the skills and procedures and we copied and pasted which term we would do each skill or procedure in. So we broke it down into 3 terms because in Medicine Hat Public, this is who I worked with on this one. In Medicine Hat Public, they have 3 terms. So I'll show you the grade 6 one as well, because it's a little bit different because they have 4 terms. Also, we put in resources, and you'll see that lots of these links are clickable. So you can click on any of these and find resources that are related to that part of the day or part of the learning block. Edem Online, lots of UFly resources, lots of examples. And again, these are skills and procedures. For the read aloud section, we really love Maria Walther's books, The Ramped Up Read Aloud and Shake Up Shared Reading. In the Ramped Up Read Aloud, she actually will say something like have a comprehension strategy, like predict. And then she will say, if you want to demonstrate how to predict, here are 5 excellent picture books that help with predicting. And there are so many suggested short stories or picture books that I found that very useful. In independent reading and the mini lesson, the small group work, I'm just wanting to get to, and then we talked about which parts they would do in other subject areas. So they would do lots of the presenting pieces and the research parts, because research is in the writing section. They would do the research part in cross-curricular situations, so in a different subject area. And then a lot of teachers found this very helpful. These are some suggested resources, so books that kids might want to read in each term. So some short stories, poetry, fiction and nonfiction, but some books that they always use with grade 4. So this is a good list as well. So I'm looking back. What was the main title, what you clicked on? Oh, this particular one is, I wrote it down, long range ELAL, planning based on literacy routines. I'll show you right here. Long range ELAL planning based on literacy routines. Okay, so that was a grade 4 one. I'm going to quickly show you the 5 and the 6. The 5, we changed the block, the teacher that we were working with likes to start with a word of the day and do the vocabulary up front. And that works for her. It might be a great way to do it if you have English language learners. Again, start with your vocabulary and then get into the task. Medicine at Public does a lot of work with morphology. So this teacher spent 20 minutes on her word work, which is longer than some that I've seen, but it's working for her, so that's great. Then 20 minutes of small group, 10 minutes of engaging with text, which covers text forms and structures, vocabulary, and comprehension work. And then 30 minutes of, they call it responding to text instead of writing. So I would have called this a writing section, but all of the writing that this teacher does is in response to a text, either using a mentor text or using a piece that they've read and then responded to. Kim, do you want to add anything there?
No, my only request was maybe when you have a chance, if you can repeat the title. There's so many that have that same picture planning on that page that I find it's difficult to find. Like what you're sharing, and I've been and used these documents are so robust. But right now, even in being part of ARPDC, I'm like, oh my gosh, which one was it?
Where do you find them? Okay.
Yeah, so if you can
okay.
then just go back to the title and I'll write the title in the chat for everybody.
Okay. So this is all of the ELAL resources.
Yes, thank you.
And then I had to go down kind of far to get to long range ELAL planning.
Thank you for redoing this. I think
no
it's
problem. Long range ELAL planning based on literacy routines.
Thank you. Awesome.
You're welcome. And then I'm going to show the last one, the grade 6. It was slightly different because the teacher that I worked with is actually in a junior high, and grade 6 is the youngest in their junior high. So a few things changed in planning for grade 6. She only had a 50-minute block to do all of her literacy work, and they have a library period once a week. And this particular teacher wanted to make sure that the library period was really useful and that they were covering curricular outcomes during library period. So we made sure that there were outcomes connected with library period in the text forms and structure organizing idea and in comprehension. And then just like you would with elementary or junior high, she would work with the teachers who also teach science, social studies, to make sure that the oral language and the vocabulary and the writing were supported in other subject areas. All right, so the grade 6 one is slightly different. They start their class every day with 10 minutes of independent reading, which I did with grade 6, 7, 8, and 9. We always started with 10 minutes of reading, but give them something to keep in mind during that time. So, for example, sometimes I would say, think about whose point of view you're hearing from in the piece that you read today. So whatever they're reading, I would say it that quickly, like in 20 seconds, focus on perspective or point of view, and then we would discuss it at the end of the 10 minutes. And then after the silent reading, move into some word work or morphology, and you can use lots of the same resources that you used with your younger students. And still be doing those word matrices to support the morphology. Then quick mini lessons. So I like my mini lessons under 5 minutes. pick something that we're going to focus on for today. And this is what you're going to focus on in your writing time. So we might, if we are looking at text forms and structures, focus on, I'm just trying to think of which one I would do. So something like headings. If we're doing a piece of nonfiction today, think about what headings would be on each of your paragraphs, something like that. I wanted to get to the library piece because that I found was so valuable when we talked together about how library period could be a useful time for learning content. So sometimes we would talk about what genre did you read today in library class? Okay, that would fulfill one of the outcomes of the curriculum. And so the way that we did this is really just copying and pasting from the New Learn Alberta curriculum website and putting those skills and procedures into which term we would break them into. And at this school, they have 4 reporting terms. So we separated it into 4 terms. And again, as I said before, talk about cross-curricular and work with your colleagues on what you would do. And we made a list of some of the texts, so short stories, books, poems that we would use with grade 6. And this is all on the ARPDC website. If you want to try to incorporate a few new pieces, feel free to have a look through this list. All right, I went into quite detailed how we did that long range planning, and I'm willing to do long range planning with anyone. We've done it online, just having a discussion, but any of the ARPDC consultants would be happy to help you with that. How are we doing for time? We got about 20 minutes. Is there anything else that I need to feel like kind of reaching the end here? Irene or Kim, is there anything else that you wanted to add for today?
You know, this might seem small, but this morning, Tricia and I were talking about the word includes and the word such and the term such as, and we said that includes would be thou shalt do it, and the includes would be not necessarily you must do it, but it's a suggestion, and there's that difference.
That's a very good point. Right, we talked about that before we started recording. So I can't think of a particular example, but I guess I could. Let's try the word includes. I'll just put include because I think that it, and any grade, but we want English language arts. And we want only curriculum. All right. Oh, excellent. This is a perfect example. In grade 4, in the knowledge piece, it says procedural texts include recipes or instruction manuals. Poetic structures include ballads, poems, or songs narrating short stories and stanzas. So in grade 6, we've talked about this in other sessions, that it would be wise to include some ballads with your grade 6. Then what about if we use such as? Such as means this is a choice that you have. And I'm going to go, oh, that's in kindergarten. Grade 5. Oh, and this would have fit in with what Kim was talking about yesterday about the land as a text. And the land in grade 5. Oh, it didn't take me directly to it. That's in text forms and structure. I'm sorry. Anyway, that the land can be understood through personal connections to its features, such as living things in the natural world, human-made structures, patterns and cycles, and stories of place. Meaning that you don't have to do all of these, but you can choose which ones you want to do. All right. Well, it seems that I have thoroughly zipped through what I was planning on doing today. My final question to you is that what pieces of the lesson that I demonstrated, what pieces of the lesson would you use in your own ELAL planning? Are there some pieces that you found more useful than others, or pieces that you think you might want to bring in that you haven't been? And you can put those in the chat. What was the name of the book list you just showed? Okay, the book lists are all at the end of the literacy routine planning documents. So where it has long range ELAL planning based on literacy routines, at the end of the grade 4 year plan, sample year plan, is a list of grade 4 ideas for stories and books you might use. And it's like that for each one, the 4, the 5, and the 6. Question, how do you include book studies? Whole class, small group, or independent? Any of them, all of them. The book study that I was talking about with Otter, I would probably do that one as a whole class read aloud. I'm also going to send you a year plan or a unit plan for the book Barren Grounds by David Robertson, which has content like Indigenous content and sky science content, and it would work well with a grade 6 class. So that would be a whole class. But I would also do a small group and plenty of small group work. The thing is, you don't have to do everything with a novel. You can do them with short stories, or you can use picture books. And definitely there's time for independent reading. Students like to have a library book of their own, and you can make those useful by making sure they're connected to curricular outcomes too. Okay, people are liking the games to play with the word wall. Book club planning. So Heidi, are you thinking about like book clubs as in small group book clubs? Kim, do you want to add anything about, or Irene, about book club planning? So I usually did book clubs on a particular theme. So I made sure that my books had some kind of connection, so that there would be times when they would talk about their book in their small groups, but also times when we'd be able to share as a whole class, so that they would have some kind of a common thread that would connect all the students to each other and connect the books to each other. So I would plan to have a theme for my book club planning. That's a very short answer. Kim, do you want to add anything about book clubs?
Yeah, I'm just madly going to post something. Penny Kittle is my book club mentor.
That is who I've been trying to think of, Penny Kittle.
Yeah, she focuses more like generally like junior high and up, but
Right.
I'm just going to post a document here that has some really great, the favorite element that I love that she does is the students do book talks about books. And of course, she's part of choosing the books that they have an option to do book clubs or book talks. and they read some books, and they, like, the teacher can do a book talk about it, or if a student's read it, they can do a book talk, and then the students select the book that they'd like to read in small groups. And then she had like a whole table, and you wouldn't have to do this many, of notebooks. And on the front of the notebook was written a concept: friendship, conflict, relationships. And the students would read their book and get together and talk about it, and then choose one of the concepts and write in those notebooks as a collective group about how their book was aligned with that concept. So if it was friendship, they would write about how the concept friendship applied to their book. I watched it in a classroom in Banff, and it was grade 7, 8, but you could do it 4 to 6. It was amazing, the conversations. So you can tell I'm a little passionate. Okay, I will put the link to that in the chat. So that's just a bit about some of the questions Penny has her students ask and inquire and so forth. Sorry, Irene.
Oh, that's perfect, because Penny Kittle was the person that I was trying to think of when I was saying, she said, practice reading this and then share it as you think the author would want it to be heard. That was Penny Kittle as well. So I see Irene unmuted. Irene, do you want to share?
Just, in terms of planning too, I've often used book clubs in terms of the next X amount of weeks is book club week, where we focus on that. And I've also planned it in terms of every Monday and Wednesday is book club. So I've tried to intersperse it with the teaching of language arts, but also you could do it I'm doing it in one fell swoop. So either one works, that's for sure. But that was just a comment about how do I and where do I sort of plan for it in my work.
Excellent. Thanks for sharing that. Yeah. Although I've shared templates today, like 3 different ones, that is really important. What Irene is saying is that teachers have that autonomy, and you make decisions based on how things are going in your class and how your students will work better. So yeah, that's a good point. It's not always the same, for sure. And someone asked if the literacy routine planning document lines up with the sample year plans, and the answer is yes. So the literacy, the grade 4, 5, and 6, they're all slightly different. And when you take this and make it fit your class, I'm sure you'll make it slightly different again. So whichever way you choose to use it is completely up to you, but make sure that it fits your class, and the structure fits your year plan as well. I'm going to put up our email addresses again. Are there any long-range planning? We did not work on one for grade 3, but is there, Kim? Kim's nodding. So I think it's also there for grade 3. Yes. Nicole, do you have a split class? I've been thinking so much about that split class planning that yes, of course it makes perfect sense, as Lana and Kim said, to plan with the younger grade in mind and then scale up for your older grade. Okay, I will share screen for the last time. And I finished a little early today, I'm sorry, but hopefully you got what you needed and you got some ideas about planning and integrating literature. Those are my 2 goals for today. And I'm going to leave all 3 of our email addresses up so that you can contact us if you would like to. Hopefully we can support you in whatever way you need. Thanks for coming today. Are there any last, tomorrow Irene's going to talk more about nonfiction and how to incorporate nonfiction into your language arts block. So that will be very useful. I didn't talk about that very much at all in this session. So thank you. Thanks for being here. We'll see you again tomorrow. Stop. I'm trying to stop recording. Yeah. There we go.